Well, I tell you what, Gleeson, this is the story of the week. As I said, the other night, it's the cane toad problem of Brisbane, now migrated all the way down to Victoria. A little bit in Sydney, but I have to say the New South Wales Police must be drinking something, wearing something, doing something differently, because they shut it down more effectively, I have to say, than down here in Victoria. But it's a shocking look.
Yeah, your cane toad analogy was perfect, Peter, I must say. Look, I think Australians are roundly incredibly disappointed, frustrated at what's going on around the country in relation to these protests. And, of course, they started in Brisbane and they were incredibly punitive in Brisbane over the last 2 or 3 months. We've seen the Premier over the last few days come out very strongly, said enough's enough. Imagine if it was your mother or your grandmother that was in the back of an ambulance and they were unable to get to the hospital in time with a life-threatening injury or whatever. But I think, the guy that's attracted a lot of the attention is this guy called Eric Serge Herbert. Now, he's the recidivist offender. He's the guy, he's the sort of totemic sort of eco-warrior among this group. He's been arrested 9 times in the last few weeks, and each time he goes to court, Peter, the problem is that the magistrates, the judiciary in Queensland, basically give him a slap on the wrist. And in fact, we had a magistrate here only yesterday. Her name is Magistrate Leanne Scoynes, and she said that his behaviour was limited to behaviour which is in relation to your principles. She gave him a slap on the wrist, no conviction recorded, which means that he can continue to travel overseas. I would suggest if he is going to travel overseas, that maybe a place like Syria might be a good spot for him. But this is the problem right now in Queensland, Peter. This is the problem. We've got magistrates in the judiciary who aren't prepared to introduce and implement fines and penalties, including jail time, that reflect community expectations. And, we've consistently seen these people just continue. He walks out of the watch house, walks out of court, and then goes back onto the picket line. And today we saw the William Jolly Bridge closed essentially all day, one of the main arteries, one of the main bridges that links South Bank to the city. I don't know where it's going to end, but I fear that it will end in a tragedy.
There seemed to almost be a collusion here, though, with a lot of authorities, Peter. I have to say that comments from the magistrate, 11 times this turkey's fronted the court, 11 times he's basically got off with a slap on the wrist. I mean, if you and I were speeding 11 times over, or we were parking our car the wrong way and holding up traffic in downtown Brisbane, in your case, Melbourne in mine, we wouldn't get 11 times to front the magistrate and be told we're standing on the matter of principle. I mean, this is pretty outrageous. I know you've got some Voxies, I've got some socials. I might put a few of them up on the screen, but this is what viewers are telling me. This is what they're sending in my Facebook page. I'll read out Angela. We'll start with her. She says there needs to be extremely hard penalties, jail time, and cutting their welfare benefits for at least 6 months. That would communicate a strong message from the general population. I'll go to Janet. She said they should be treated the same way as any person who disturbs the peace, disrupts people from getting to work, emergency services, and taking up valuable time. I want to play a grab. You mentioned Anastasia Palaszczuk. I want to play a grab from Anastasia Palaszczuk a little earlier in the week, because I think you're being generous to her, Gleeson. I don't think she's taking these protests seriously enough. They've been going on for 6+ months. Her legislation could have been in and operational through the Queensland Parliament. You've only got one house. You haven't got an upper house, and she's got the numbers in the lower house. Her laws now actually only focus on devices that they might use, not the very principle of vexatious protesting in itself. Let's have a listen.
This is specifically aimed at the use of dangerous devices that are dangerous not only to the people that are using them, but to our emergency services personnel that actually have to free them and can injure themselves doing so. You know, I want to see the free movement of our AMBOs being able to get to and from where they need to be. I need our fireys out fighting fires, and I need our police out doing their job as well.
Okay, Peter Gleeson, we're talking about devices, the bike locks that they're putting around their neck. We're not talking about dragging them off the street in the case of your mate double-barrelled, who's been there 11 times over, arrested 11 times over. We're also, you know, not talking about how coordinated this is with other protests around the world. We're seeing the move to tarmacs at airports. We saw that in London. I suspect that's headed our way.
Drones.
If they're trying to win over the Australian public, this is the wrong way, I reckon, to go about it.
It's absolutely the wrong way to go about it, and I think Anastasia Palaszczuk's reaction there was pretty obvious, and that is that the good folk of Brisbane are heartily sick and tired of being held up in traffic every day. Now, this week has been extraordinary. This week, I mean, I had a number of instances where I was held up. I had a number of instances where friends of mine and colleagues were held up. Meetings were delayed. I mean, it's getting to the point now where the dislocation to the general public, the way in which the general public is being treated in this instance is beyond a joke. And the other thing I would mention too here, Peter,
sorry. She's been talking about, your Premier has been talking about legislation for many, many months now. Why isn't it through the Parliament already? Why are we still talking about it?
Well, you know, there was a committee, a legal affairs committee, that was due to see submissions on this. And now she has basically said, we're going to forget the submissions process. We're going to expedite the process. I take your point, Peter. I'm not in any way defending Anastasia Palaszczuk. I think that in this instance, she has been jolted. She's been jolted into action because so many people are angry and, quite frankly, peed off with what's going on. So, you know, if you want to talk about the politics of this, she's erred, and she's erred badly. I mean, a lot of people have said, could you imagine Bjelke-Petersen? He would have sorted this out within a week. But just let me also make the point here about our friend Mr. Eric Serge Herbert, who, as I said, is the sort of, you know, the leader, the sort of totemic leader. He's now become Australia's greatest bludger because he's on Newstart benefits. What the hell is he doing out there on Newstart benefits, protesting every day? He calls himself a self-confessed couch surfer, so he's bludging on his mates. He's basically sleeping wherever he can get, wherever he lays his hat. I think that's also an issue here. How come these people are on our streets? Taxpayers are paying them to go out and stop them from getting to where they want to go on the roads. The whole system here is flawed.
And look, we're going to go to the word of viewers, not just us. But before we do, I want to say how unhinged and hysterical some of these protesters are. We saw the guy on top of an aircraft there at London City Airport, which is just on the outskirts of London, just over the Thames. But also, let's have a look at this bloke crying, lying on the asphalt in Britain, but crying his little heart out. Let's have a look.
What's your name, dude?
Are you okay?
What's your name?
I'm just a father of 2 children that's very frightened of their future.
How old are your children?
They're 10 months and 4 years.
You okay?
Yeah.
No. I'm getting the bag off you.
Can you see a picture? Those are the picture of your children?
Yeah.
He says he's a father whose children at 10 months and 4 years, I think he said, are terrified about their future. Now, I suppose they don't have much understanding of any of these issues. This is a father grandstanding on the back of his children about an issue he evidently feels strongly about. But we've got to rely on adults to take the hysteria and the anxiety out of this issue. I mean, if that's the way an adult, a dad, would react, I worry that we're only going to see more and more kids get themselves into a whole sense of panic over something that we as a world can absolutely manage. But junking our economies in the West is not the way to manage it.
Incredibly irresponsible, Peter, incredibly. And, you know, we see it with Greta Thunberg. I mean, her performance at the UN, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, you know, if you had a 10 or a 12 or a 14-year-old girl watching her, you'd swear blind we'd be gone by 2030. I mean, it's the sort of stuff, and I had, you know, recently hosted on my show, I had a child psychologist on who was really, really, really angry about the way in which some teachers, some educators, some parents were brainwashing their kids into believing that we won't have a planet by 2030. I mean, irresponsible, dumb, and, I don't know. I'm with you, Peter Credlin. I'm worried about the way these people are portraying this issue.
All right, let's have a listen to what viewers who watch this program and others thought of the protests out on the streets this week.
And I do believe in having the right and the ability to be able to protest about things when it's affecting people in ways like that, and especially emergency services know that that's not appropriate. There are better ways to get your message across. There should be tougher penalties for these people. I think, that if it's a one-off, then perhaps we can be lenient and say, OK, no conviction recorded, but to repeatedly break the law, then there's no excuse for that at all.
They've got a reason for doing it, and that's fine, but they really shouldn't make it hard for other people. There are other ways of doing things.
I can't agree with their interruption of the people trying to go to work. I think people are getting very frustrated, but I think that's what they want to happen. They get fines, little fines, they're not enough. I think they should be, maybe banned from doing it like they've done for a couple of people. They should be banned from joining them or something like that.
I also want to play a grab from Peter Dutton. He's been very outspoken on this issue. He's called for them to lose their welfare and other things, but he also had more to say today.
I think it's right that the police will interact with them today. Hopefully a lot of them are arrested or moved on, because there's a huge disruption to the CBDs, which is what they want. When you are acting outside of the law, which these people are doing, you're diverting valuable police resources. I think there should be a price to pay for that. And it's happened in Victoria, where the state government before has sought to levy that charge of the police response.
All right. Where do we know these protests are going to go next week and beyond? Is it going to be continuing, Peter Gleeson?
Yeah, it looks like they will be. They've already indicated that they'll be hitting the streets again next week. As I said, Peter, I don't know where this is going to end. I mean, the police are frustrated. I've spoken to people from the police union. The police are incredibly frustrated. And in fact, some of them are even putting their lives at risk in many respects, because some of these locks and devices that they're using are booby-trapped. There's shards of glass in there. I mean, it's just incredibly irresponsible. And I loved the fact that our Sky viewers, the voice of reason always, there are better ways to get your message across. Stay in your own lane, guys. Go and protest in a park on a Sunday afternoon. By all means, protest about climate change.
Or
we're all on in the same
box.
boat. Protest at the ballot box, indeed.
We have just had elections where Australians did not vote to increase the targets. There was a very clear choice there between what the coalition was offering, 26 to 28%, and what Labor was offering, which was a 50% emissions reduction target. And Australians, as a majority, suck it up, this is democracy, did not vote to increase the targets. This is a whole lot of 30-something, 20-something sore losers in my book, Peter Gleeson.
Oh, 100%. And we saw that in central Queensland in seats like Flynn and Capricornia and Dawson and Herbert. The good folk of central Queensland, and I said it earlier in the week and I'll say it again, Bob Brown played a crucial role in convincing Queenslanders not to vote for Bill Shorten or the Greens because of the ratbaggery and the way they went into places like Clermont and tried to lecture Queenslanders about what's right and wrong when it comes to mining and jobs in mining.
All right, we'll leave it there. But the political strategist in me sees that Labor's attempts this week to shift away from its 50% emissions reduction target to match the government is that Labor itself knows that these climate protests, just like Bob Brown, are not helping their cause, and that they'll be seen as the side of the radicals, not middle of the ground, middle of the road, ordinary Australian policy objectives in this area. So I think that's as much why Labor's trying or moving to abandon the higher targets, because they don't want to be tarred with the brush of these sorts of activists. Peter Gleeson, thanks very much for your time tonight.